3, 2, 1. Good morning. This is Animal Uncontrol. Welcome to the voice chat. These calls are pre-recorded for upload to social media, and by joining a call, you are consenting to being recorded. Anyone wishing to join a call should email me at animaluncontrol@gmail.com, and I will reply with instructions. Today's topics: dog bite-related fatality roundup, mutt-related lawsuits, mutts on the plane, AI bot mutt fails, and some gun porn. Joining me is Mr. J and Rodney. What is up?
Good to be here.
Yeah, good to have you back. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been juggling kids and work and stuff like that. It's been one of those crazy stretch of like 2 or 3 months where everything's just, you're just struggling to keep up with it all.
Yeah, plus with the holidays too. It's thing is, January sort of the doldrums stuff tends to wind down some. Typically, not always, but actually, Rodney, since you're on, I wanted to talk about, because the other day we were discussing, AI fails and
Yeah.
how some of these, like, just, well, sort of generally, but specific to the space. So here's what I did was I Googled what is the number one reason for dog attacks, right? So what did it say? It said fear is the most common reason for dog attacks. Dogs may bite out of fear, anxiety, or stress, right? So down here it says dogs bite for a variety of reasons, most commonly as a reaction to something. So Rodney, I mean, I because you're an IT person, I'm an IT person. I had some thoughts on this, but how do you, I mean, I'm just in the abstract, it's just a guess, or maybe you do know, how is it computing this result, you think?
Well, I kind of wonder, is the fear the result of what caused the attack was the dog's fear, right? That's what it's saying.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so it's hard to say exactly what's happening in the background with it, but we do know that like ChatGPT is going to scan the open internet. It's going to take all the available data and then process that through whatever filters or kind of, whatever they've put in the background to make sure it doesn't tell somebody how to build like a chemical weapon. So,
Yeah.
like there's a lot of like filtering that goes on where I guess you could say the creators, if you want to use that term, introduce like their value system, in the background.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, in general, it's going to come from the training data, most of which is available on the open internet. That's my understanding.
Yeah. I mean, that was more or less what I was thinking too, is really what it's doing is, well, it's not reporting actual information, because I don't believe this. I think that most dog attacks are due to, inbred aggression tendencies, like, say, pit bulls, for example, though they're not the only example. I think that's why, because that kind of primary, mindless aggression is pretty much limited to dogs. We talk about other animals on here. Like, we don't have, say, house cats chasing down joggers and biting them. Like, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So
And
oh, sorry, go ahead.
For really generalized questions, like the type of stuff you feed ChatGPT that you would normally Google, right? Like it's going to get its knowledge base, we could say, from a variety of places. But for really general stuff, not like help with your calculus homework, but like, just something you would feed into like Google, right?
Yep.
It's going to quote whatever the prevailing opinion is from the
Yep.
sources it's scraping data from. So
Yep.
society has a tendency to always side with the dog, therefore the answer you get it's going to reflect that, because that's what's 90% of the dog content on the open internet or whatever training data they're scraping for to answer the question is going to be extremely pro dog.
Yep. Oh yeah, exactly. That exactly. I mean, that's my thought also, is that it's not, this isn't some kind of like taxonomic, scientific analysis. It's just whatever the most popular opinion is.
Yeah, and that's kind of like sort of AI is a marketing term. It's like it's how do tech weasels, as someone who works in tech, I can say that, right? But like how do tech weasels gobble up some of that sweet VC money? Well, you just use the term du jour, right? You put a spin on it. So you've got to sell these tools as like actual intelligence, right? Like a thinking thing. And they're cool, but really that's not how like language models work. Like that's really what it is, the language model. And the reason that distinction is important, if you've ever worked on like information retrieval problems and stuff like that, like you're assigning like weights to different words and using statistics to kind of like come up with a response, so it's not like it's actually thinking. It's not magic, like to our
Right.
conversation yesterday.
Yeah. Well, yeah, people don't really, computers are not magic. And really all you have is it's a CPU processing instructions. Like that's it. I mean, it's because people ask me about this quite a bit. And like, true AI would be where you have not necessarily a machine, but an app that can, with the same agency as a human, right? It can think and communicate and act and interact with its environment more or less the same way a human can. And as far as I know, that's a programming problem that's yet to be solved.
Yeah, it's like quantum computing, right? Like it can't pass like basic tests. You know what I mean? It's like it's a media, like every technology follows the hype cycle. There's like 5 graphs I use in my daily life. The hype curve is one of them. Everyone should be familiar with it. Like refer to the graph, please. But like when a new technology comes out, it gets hyped to like this insane like plateau of unreasonable expectations.
Yep.
It doesn't mean it's like not very valuable and useful. It just means it's not what people are telling you it is. So eventually the bubble pops. We come back down to earth and we can use it for like what it's realistically going to be good for. So,
Right. Yep.
that's kind of where we're at with AI.
Yep. But that's what I'm saying is, I guess the point is that, people see this and like, oh no, we've been wrong about everything. It's like, no, again, this is just a popular opinion, not, a proper, like it's not a double blind peer review scientific study or anything like that. So,
Yeah, it's regurgitating what it found on the training data. Like that's the
yep.
simplest way you can think of it. Like it's cool. Like it can help you get things done. It's like we've perfected the chat bot, like it's, right. Like it's way better than, but that essentially that's what it is it's the CPU is following the instructions it's given. And we've like gotten really good at writing those instructions basically.
Yeah.
And our computing power is, the computing power has gotten so good in the last couple of years. It's really bailed me out in a lot of my jobs because you don't have to write like his airtight code anymore. So that really helps too,
Right, you just like use Python for everything. It's like, who cares about the single thread performance? It's irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly. We're not having to write in C anymore, thank God.
Hey, Mr. J, are you there? I know I tried to raise you a minute ago. You on still?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, yeah. I know. Sorry to like bury in all that gobbledygook. So maybe shifting gears a little bit. How are you? Because I know you have a lawsuit pending that's or in process that's kind of relevant to the space? Yeah, I mean, insofar as maybe there's some things you can't discuss or maybe don't want to, but do you have any updates on that or anything interesting to share in that area?
Well, not really. I've just been trying to make my improvements, wink wink, in physical therapy. But it was funny because the insurance company was like, "Oh, we're going to deny your claim, and we think that you came up with these situational injuries after you were working there and blah 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 blah." I said, "Word, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna ignore you. You're not my attorney, and I'm gonna keep going until my attorney tells me not to show up. I'm gonna keep going." So
That's
I've
right.
just been attending my lessons. That's it. I mean, my
Yeah.
sessions, not lessons.
Yep. Yeah. Well, but you had it was a like I said, there's an improper termination was part of this, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically, it was a wrongful termination,
Yep.
and like that's the new ambulance chasers out here. So I let him jump on my ambulance. I ain't gonna lie.
I guess they do serve a purpose. Yeah, that's interesting stuff. So, well, I know a lot of times in lawsuits, one thing a defendant does, and many plaintiffs do it too, if they is to be very passive aggressive, right? So you file a motion and they have whatever 35 or a complaint or a motion. They have 35 days to respond. So what do? Well, they wait till day 35 and the response is to ask for more time. Well, we need another 90 days or whatever. I mean, that's like almost ubiquitous. It happens all the time. So, but yeah, keep after them. Don't cut them any slack. They don't deserve any. So, um,
No, and to add to
Can I
that
get,
point real quick, you're right. And hey, Rodney, how you doing? You're
hey
right. What
man.
they were going to do was they tried to tell me to wait till the 30th to go seek treatment. And then what was the day after that? The 31st. So they were trying to box me in so I didn't get a diagnosis so my case wouldn't be so strong.
of course, of course.
What can I get a quick summary of what actually happened, like the fast version?
No, the fast version was I was working with a bunch of nutters, and due to the constant berating and the extra work put on the non-dog lover, when I got injured, one of the employees, basically some of my stuff got missing, some water bottles. I inquired about the water bottles. It was a big joke. I was put on leave because of my disdain to the issue. And then the nutter decided to say I gave him a courtesy reach around when that's not my thing. And so after they did that, I said it was a hostile work environment. They decided to say that we'll do an investigation. In the course of the investigation, they gave me 2 weeks worth of pay and told me to go fuck off. And I was like, that's not cool.
Yep. And a lot of this seemed
And I
to
was going to leave. Yeah.
it sort of stemmed
Hostile
from
work
because I guess
environments are
you'd
weird, too.
expressed a dislike of dogs at one point, and that sort of I know that's again not they turned him into the foaming at the mouth rage monsters in a sense. So sorry, Rodney, you were going to say something.
No, I mean that's what the legal system's for, man. Like hostile work environments are super common, and it's ridiculous that people have to put up with it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One of the things
I
like
don't know why can't people just go to work and focus on their job and like just get work done. Like that's kind of why we're here, like
well,
it's
you've
crazy.
seen it a lot, I'm sure, because it happens a lot in IT. Is you almost always have the office bully who seems like this seems that their job is to make everyone else miserable, and it's very, very common. And my thing is that I mean, particularly if I have any authority, is that the best thing to do. Like, let's say you're an IT manager and you start a new job, figure out who the office bully is and fire them. Because it'll be the best thing you can do, right? And the problem is like, yeah, very few of them want to do that. Usually the excuse is, well, we're short-handed, we can't lose anybody. But the thing is that,
yeah, you're gonna 10x your morale and your productivity with that one move. Like it's kind of like if I'm digging out a hole and someone's standing on top and throwing dirt back in, I'm going to be more productive by myself. You know?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And that's the thing is, yeah, people start to hate their job. I actually quit a job over an office bully once, because basically I said,
oh, that's the other good one.
Yeah, well, I threw down the gauntlet. I said, this is a really, and we're going down a rabbit hole, but I basically said, like, he goes or I go. And got to understand, like, everybody hated this guy. Everybody. But they wouldn't do it. So I said, all right. And not only that, it wasn't even so much that. I said, look, I refuse to work with this person. I'm not doing it. I'm not.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is, like, I hear so many managers, upper level people complain about turnover. It's like, look, you can fix that. You know, it's pretty easy. So it's like, oh, we're shorthanded with this or that. It's like you're about to get a lot more shorthanded.
Oh yeah.
But just to close it out, before anybody throws down the gauntlet, have a job lined up. You've always got to be ready.
I did.
You don't take a hostage you can't shoot. You know?
Well, this was back in the 90s when I could like get a job in probably a few hours. But that was the thing. Yeah, they're the office bully, and I find almost always the office bully, they're not competent. They're not productive. Really, their value to the organization is negative, often by quite a bit. So probably, the best thing you can do is get rid of them. Maybe, in your magnanimity, you give them one chance to get it together. Like if I even think you're giving somebody a ration of shit, you're gone. You better be impeccable from now on. But yeah, very few managers do that. So, but yeah, it's a problem.
I want to add to that point, not to cut you off. I worked in IT. That's why I got out of IT, because I didn't realize that the person who was training me was the IT bully. And when it comes to where I was working in the kitchen, see, it's a whole different plateau. We're supposed to be a family unit, because I'm going to be working damn near next to you, smelling your fucking breath, smelling your body odor, smelling your feet every fucking day. So it has to be a communal environment. I don't care if you want to lick a dog's ass. Just don't bring that to work, dude. Come to work and work. Don't leave because your dog's sick. You're not the only person home, because I guarantee you the dog didn't call you and tell you it was sick.
Yep.
So let's not play this game. We need people who are more. Here's another asshole. I'm at the dog park, and this guy's got this Labrador who's chasing the ducks already. Like, why do you bring dogs up to a park with wildlife? I don't get people.
I think they like that. They think it's cute when their dog harasses wildlife.
That's not cute.
They think, well, it not only is it not cute, I mean, that's expressly illegal in a lot of places. Like when I had my falling out with my, hike with my, with the trail association. So some of the other leaders would do that. They would let their dogs off leash to like chase ducks and geese and other wildlife. And I made the point, I said, that's illegal. That's poaching.
Thank you.
At least under like the the applicable laws in the jurisdiction. That's
because isn't that dog hunting in a term?
Well,
it's hunting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Well, you got a retriever. It's trying to retrieve a live duck. So basically, yes, technically that's hunting. And it's like, well, is it duck season? Are they licensed hunters? Probably not.
Is it an endangered species?
Yeah. Well, and a lot of it too.
Is it a Canadian geese that can stall an international incident? We're not really looking at this problem from the right views either.
Yep.
That
Yeah.
Canada could go ape shit if a dog decided to eat a Canadian geese.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
They
mean,
are
I don't know.
protected species in this country.
Rover always gets off the hook, though. That's the thing. It's like if it was expressed any other way, yeah, there'd be all kinds of trouble. But when it involves a dog, it's all good, really, because that's the why we have all these problems with dogs. So,
Like IHD said, like we've all said, if you want to get away with a crime, get a dog.
oh yeah. Oh yeah, it's almost a perfect murder. Speaking of that, I want to segue into some dog bite related fatality stuff. What's interesting was I was on, let me refresh this. I want to talk about this case, but there's another one I wanted to discuss first. The last on the Dogs Bite blog, the last one posted was actually this unreported case from a couple of years ago, but we'll circle back to that in 5-10 minutes. I wanted to just go over this one. This was in Volusia County, is just south of me. So it's about an hour away, actually, from where I live. And this is, I mean, this stuff happens, unfortunately, way too often. But, an 8-year-old was killed after he stopped riding his bike to pet 2 dogs. Now, well, it's the other point that IHD makes often is that he often does deep dives into, the dogs being brought into schools like comfort dogs and the like. Of course, they're probably all stoned out of their gourd on, I don't know, Vicodin or something. But but it seems to be that, there's a movement afoot to like remove whatever inhibitions children have to interacting with dogs, right? They want to remove whatever reluctance or resistance they have to, approach dogs, interact with dogs, and so forth. They do that, right? And then they wonder why this happens. Now, a lot of it's how do they know he stopped to pet them? They may have just, chased him down and mauled him. He may not have tried to interact with him. But even if he did, well, for a couple of things. One, that does not excuse what the dogs did in any way at all, period. Number one. And yeah, number two, like we're basically brainwashing our kids into doing things like that. So, like, it's one another like nutter bait and switch routine. On one hand, they say, "Oh, don't be afraid of dogs. They're all these like pure and perfect fur babies sent from heaven," right? But then when something happens, they say, "Well, he shouldn't have done that." Okay, so he shouldn't have done what you just told him to do. I mean, maybe they didn't tell him to pet these dogs specifically, but what do you want to bet? There was, it doesn't even necessarily have to be a school program, but they inculcated in everyone that, oh yeah, they're just these, pure and perfect little fur babies. They're adorable little wiggle butts. And yeah, we get 4.5 million dog bites a year, but those are all bad people, right? They all deserved it, right? So, any case, he was riding bike. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, a core nutter trait is the most shameless dishonesty you can, like, I can't think of another, like, swath of people that is that dishonest and willing to speak out of both sides of their mouth,
Yep.
depending on the situation. It's crazy. They can't be held to anything they've said. It's just wild, man. You know what I mean? They'll say one thing today, and then when the circumstances change, and okay, that's maybe not the most favorable explanation for why this dog is the way it is, or whatever, then they revert to the exact opposite line of thinking. It's just whatever they need to win the internet argument.
Well, whatever makes sense whatever supports their interests at the time, right? They don't have any real principles. Actually, I did a couple of monologues, and then I call them bait and switch routines, but they're being duplicitous. You can see my screen, right? So it says contradictory doubleness of thought, speech, or action. So that's what's, you know.
Hold on, let me add to that. That's like I'm a big comic book nerd, but there's something called the Living Tribunal, and it's got three faces. That's what I was going to say dog culture is. They have three faces. They have the face of feeling, they have the face of reason for the dog, and they have the face of protection for the dog. That's all they see. They don't see anything else in the scenario. They don't see the heartbreak of the family. They don't see the torn up of the family. They don't see the missing human being in the situation. They just go right to the point of juxtaposing, saying, what happened to the dog? How was the dog? And if it happened to the dog, oh my God, then we have to get every inclusion of how the dog felt, what the dog went through, and what the dog saw before it died.
Oh yeah, well if you go down into these, there's a ton of comments on here, and a lot of it was like, well, those dogs were abused, you know, they were neglected, they were, you know, they were raised wrong. It's like you don't know that, you know. It's like many of.
But that's always the three faces they throw out. That's always the same school of fish arguments. And back to Rodney's point, what they do on my channel, they get me strikes when I have debates with them, and I'm winning the debate like I always do because we have research and receipts. They get me flagged. They get me blocked. They give me a strike because they don't want to see themselves on my page, on my channel, losing the argument.
Yep.
Yeah, it's I think to sum it up, you can't go into anything with a dog nutter without understanding that, like, they're not going to have principles, because they don't. The only thing that they care about is winning the argument on behalf of the dog, and that argument is totally unwinnable if you go by like basic reason, you know, like logic, like. Anyway.
Well, hold on, Rodney. The argument's never winnable because you have to understand that they're stepping in the way for the dog, speaking for the dog, using the logic of a human for a dog. The dog cannot do anything on its own. That's the kicker.
Yeah, totally.
You're defending something that doesn't even understand you're having an argument.
Yeah, that's totally true, dude.
Yeah. So what I found interesting too is in some people, you know, they say maybe perhaps it's weak sauce, but I think that the comments, there's lots of videos on this, that the comments by the sheriff were, you know, encouraging. Part of it too is I don't think that, I'm trying to think what, you know, if this is like, if she gets manslaughter, that would be good, you know, 10 years. Apparently, the other thing about this that I find interesting was this dog owner has a rap sheet. They've been arrested 9 times, apparently. I don't know about convictions. But what's interesting is that, you know, we have people in our society that are prevented from owning guns, prevented from driving cars, yet they can own any dog they want. Right? Like there's no restriction on that. So you can, you know, if you're like a murderer on parole, you can get all the murder mutts you want. Can't own guns, at least not legally, you know, and if they got, say, like a DUI or whatever, you know, they may have lost their driver's license, but even people like that are not restricted from keeping dogs.
That's an interesting one, and I'm not a lawyer, but I've seen judges impose some ridiculously capricious shit on people when they've been convicted of like much less crimes. Like,
oh yeah,
they have. So I would probably say that in most places, the judge has the jurisdiction to say you can't own dogs anymore. And this is just a guess because they they'll place other, crazy restrictions on people after they've been convicted. Like you can't use the internet anymore,
Yep.
whatever.
Oh yeah.
Like
Yep.
they'll do shit like that to people, so I guess what I'm saying is this: license suspension after your like third DUI or your second or whatever, that's written into an actual statute so that the judge has no leeway. Like they have to take, like,
They have to
your
pull the license. Well, I
yeah,
think in
it's
a lot
black
of
letter law.
states, in a
But
lot of states, I think even if you're, picked up, like if you, like in my state, if you refuse to take the breath test, they'll just boom,
yeah,
take right there, just boom, gone. That's there's like no further adjudication of that. Things like if you go to send somebody to prison, yeah, that requires a, full due process. But well, the
so
point
like,
I'm making though is like if you talk about, well, if it's something dog related, you hear about where, yeah, okay, they were, so the owner was banned from owning pets or owning dogs perhaps for X number of years, but that's strictly in something dog related. In other words, like, an axe murderer who's on parole can own any pet they want, but they can't own guns or perhaps other weapons. And there's other, I guess, sanctions, imposed, or other restrictions placed upon them, right? But like I
yeah,
said,
you can't say that like dealing drugs and you get a conviction for that, like running a drug ring. It usually doesn't come with like a default, like, oh, you can't own a dangerous dog when you get out either. You know what I mean? Is that what
right?
you're saying?
Yep, yeah, yep.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
that's only because these mutts haven't been recognized as dangerous weapons. Once you
right.
recognize them in that category, then they could be used in that manner.
Yeah.
Right? Actually, they can be viewed in that manner, and you can actually start getting indicted. And I want to add something about the law point real quick. I did a little dabble to my toe in the law, but I'll tell you something my relatives told me. And Bill, you can contest to this. A judge is God in that courtroom.
Oh yeah.
You think doctors have God complexes? Deal with a judge. I've got an aunt that's a judge. She goes to the store and negotiates her prices, and she got money.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What?
yeah. Judges have way too much. They in a lot of cases they exercise their power in very capricious ways, and it's crazy the way they can make like crazy ass decisions that deeply impact people's lives. I've never been. I don't know, because like a lot of them are elected, so you could say like, well, ultimately the people pick who the judge is. Ha ha, right? That's the
Right.
kind of underlying joke. Like, nah, yeah, like that's how they wiggle out of it. But yeah, I mean, judges are like they are like a deity in that courtroom, man. Like they can impose all kinds of stuff. So yeah, it's mostly like an information problem. Like the judge could say like, yeah, as part of your sentence, you're banned from owning dogs ever, but they just don't think to do it.
Yeah. Well, they don't.
I,
And like
I,
Mr. J
Hold on,
said,
I have to drop this bomb, and I'm gonna have to be the elephant asshole in the room. Let's put it to you this way: you can give an 11-year-old life because of the color of his skin, but you will never drop a gavel or a bomb on a dog owner that kills a person. That just kills me to the core, because you're always telling us that the dog's life means more to us. Well, like I've always said, the society is built for human beings. We are the ones that supply everything for these beasts. And as IHD says, if you kill your food source, how are you going to live?
yep. Well, yeah, exactly. Because it's, yeah, they put, well, you know what it is, going back to what you said, I call it canine immunity. Because yeah, they get off the hook for everything. And really that's what needs to change. But go back to the other thing you said about, yeah, people get these dogs for protection, right? And if you get something for protection, but if it's something active like this, that's a weapon. It's a weapon, right? Because they'll say, and even if
100%.
you read down in these, comments, it's like anything you get for, for protection, is a weapon, and it needs to be contemplated as such, right? Because they'll say, oh yeah, you set 1 foot on my property and Rover and Fido are going to take you apart. But then when something happens, it will say the dogs run off property and attack somebody. Oh, well, that was just a totally unforeseeable accident. Nobody could have seen that.
Forgot. They go around and ask anybody, have you seen the dog show any aggression before?
Well, what are they going to say? They're going to say, oh, yeah, he attacks people all the time. It's like, no, they're going to say, nope, 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 nope,
Yeah, we're kind of back to the Canadian geese thing almost, where it's like, there are some species of birds that are federally protected where even if you're not hunting, like you just injure that bird in some way, that's like a $4,000 fine, possible prison time. And like they enforce it for real. Like it's not, like you act, a goose attacked you and you like on your way to the office and you like whacked it with your umbrella or killed it or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that is like by statute, they can bring charges against you for something that crazy. But if a dog does it, oh, well, it happened. Like
it's all good, right?
Yeah, it's all crazy.
Good. What's interesting too is pursuant to that, because last time I was talking about the Florida Keys and my experiences down there. Is that the Florida Keys there's a type of deer that lives down there. They call them key deer. They're dwarf.
Yeah, key deer.
They're awesome. They're very small, and those things have a ton of protections. Like if you hit one with your car, it's some ungodly fine. Even if it's an accident. Like I forget what it is, but that's the kind of thing. Like if you drive down like the overseas highway, particularly Big Pine has a bunch of them, and you got to drive really carefully through there. And they got boosted fines for speeding. You're thinking, okay, I'm on this 4-lane highway and the speed limit is 35 miles an hour. Like, why? You better stick to that speed limit, I mean, it's tempting to drive a lot faster, but don't, because you can get to be a total. I mean, I don't think you would go to prison for it, but the fines are steep. Now, if you were to poach one, like if you were to kill one intentionally, I'm sure you would go to prison for that, although I'm not positive of it. So yeah, they got all these protections on things, but people, I mean, even deliberately, right? They bring their dog to the park to terrorize the ducks and geese, and it's intentional, I think. It's not like, okay, they run up, they drag it away by the collar and leash it and never do it again. It's like, no, they keep doing it over and over and over again because they find it entertaining.
All of that, and it's charging that mud up too. I mean, why don't some nutter just get really smart and train their bully breed to attack a bald eagle on the spot? And let's see how that changes everything.
It might, it might. I mean, the kind of thing, you can be arrested, I think, even if you just own a bald eagle feather. Like, that's how protected they are.
You will get life in prison and death if you touch one of those birds.
Yeah.
So I think that's exactly what they need. And then after they, slew a bunch of the dogs to the nearest volcano, we'll be on the right track.
Yep. Yeah. So like I said, it's canine immunity, but that's what needs to end. Go back and reiterate sort of, what's the problem statement? Well, you have one type of one species of domestic animal that is the de facto sacred animal in our society. And the owners are an elite group of people that are just completely outside the rules. That's why we have all these problems, and that needs to be addressed. So in a case like this, you tell somebody, hey, you want to use dogs for protection. Really, that should just translate as, I got a shotgun for protection. So if you just grab your shotgun and shoot some kid riding his bike, on the public road past your house, that should be treated the same way. It shouldn't be treated any different. And you watch that, once that is implemented, you watch a lot of this stuff change. Like you don't want a dog to protect your property. It's just stupid. It got me back into the space because, I mean, I started blogging, 13 years ago, but I took about a 5-year break. But what got me back into it was I happened to read a story. It was in the U.S., I think in California, but I don't remember. It doesn't matter where it was exactly. But a woman locked herself out of her house, right? And there are several dogs living, in the home. I think the dogs belonged to her roommate, but she lived there, right? So what happened is, okay, so what did she do? Well, she pries open, a window and I guess a utility room to get back inside. So what happens? So she climbs in through a window, boom, the dogs delete her. And of course,
hold on, not to cut you off. That then how does that play in the same token when the dog goes to another county or another city or 8-9 blocks away and deletes somebody? Why does he get the same protection then? It's not doing the same action.
yeah.
Okay, so I see where you're going with this, and I'll just jump on that because they'll say, well, the dog was protecting its house,
Yep,
and blah,
exactly.
blah, 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 blah. But it doesn't carry the same weight 90 blocks away from the house.
Yeah. Well, but the thing is, it's like, booby
You
trapping.
don't know the dog is protecting its house. Like, you don't. Did you
Well,
stick a microphone in the dog's face and ask him like what went through his head before he killed that person? Like they just say it's this imposing or like superimposing human thought and traits onto animals again.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Well, it's anthropomorphization. But my thought is that okay, they had this great idea that basically they're going to booby, because that's what they're doing. They're booby trapping their property. Now, in this case, often, like you just said, the booby trap doesn't even stay on the property. But even if that's the case, the thing is like booby trapping your property in a way that could seriously injure somebody is illegal as hell everywhere. Probably the only thing you could do is it's a low power electric fence, something that just stings. It's not a lethal voltage. But like, yeah, setting something up where it's like, okay, I'm going to rig up a piano to drop on the head of whoever walks in my front door. Right. So you could say, okay, pianos, it's a pretty innocuous thing, right? But that could kill or injure somebody. So I say, dude, would you water my plants while I'm away? And you're like, sure. So you walk in the front door, boom. I'd go to prison forever if that happened. But again, you replace that with dogs, it's all good.
Right. And even with God, people are so ignorant of how things work until they're caught in the middle of it. But like trespassing, right? Like if someone enters your property, your yard is a good example, and you say, hey, I want you to leave. You're not welcome here anymore. And they say no. You don't just get to shoot that person or maim them or, cause grievous bodily injury to them. You legit have to call the cops and say, I've asked this person to leave. They're not leaving.
Yep.
There's some stuff like being a bouncer or whatever, where you can, physically remove people. But I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a lot of, there's a really high threshold you have to pass before you can cause harm to somebody.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Even when they're doing something wrong,
Yeah, well, absolutely. That's the thing is, like you said, simple trespass, shortcutting is not justification, certainly not for lethal force or even non-lethal force. If they're just shortcutting, yeah, I mean, if you ask them to leave and, they whip out a meat cleaver and try to take your head off, it's like, yeah, then that would most likely clear the threshold. But, simple shortcutting.
Yeah, in a lot of states you can't, if you're inside your house and someone's breaking into your car and you grab your gun and walk outside to confront them with it, your self-defense plea is gone, dude. So like, I guess the point I'm trying to illustrate is, we have a very, very high threshold, even in like stand your ground states, for being legally justified in killing or harming somebody, right?
Yep.
In a way that's permanent, for sure. So like, you can't, if you wire up the piano and it actually harms someone, like the guy delivering your mail or whatever, or someone comes onto your property and drowns in your pool, whatever, if you create a hazard on your property and someone's harmed by it, you're in a world of shit legally.
Oh yeah.
Like, you're
Yep.
but like dogs, which are the booby trap analogy is great. Like, you're harboring this dangerous thing on your property that now has hurt someone.
Yep.
It's cut and dry, dude. You need to do time. Like, that's it. Like, that's
yeah.
negligent manslaughter, like, or
Yep.
whatever you want to call it.
Yep. Oh yeah, absolutely. That's but yeah, it's only dog people but that's what they say. It's like, okay, I got the dog to, protect me or to protect the home. Well, then it needs to be contemplated like, any other weapon. If it does something, it needs to be contemplated like any other, act of violence. But it never is. It's just like with a piano.
Yeah, like, it comes with a lot of responsibility, like extreme legal responsibility.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. Yep. And yeah, like I always say though, it's another doggy double standard. And that's the other thing too, is they shouldn't, they shouldn't have those protections, because the way it is like, pretty much any and all acts of violence committed by dogs, regardless of the circumstances, are deemed legit. Why? Because dogs are always right. Why? Because dogs are all these pure and perfect fur angels sent from heaven that can never do anything wrong, right? Why don't we go after the owners? Well, because since they own the dog, so sort of like that divine nature sort of flows out of the dog into the owner, and now they become better than everybody else.
Accidents happen. This was unforeseen. Like, it doesn't matter, like, it's like, I don't really care. Like, it happened, you're liable for it, but that's they're unprincipled, right? It's the owner. The dog had a bad owner. Right? There's no bad dogs. There's bad. Okay, well, I accept your premise. You're an asshole. Let's deal with you. Oh, wait. No.
Yeah, then that, right. Well, that's more duplicity, because they're like,
Yeah.
oh, you can't, because they blame the owner in the abstract. And that's like what I want to say is it the dog or is it the owner? It's like, you can say the most best dog owner on earth probably can't handle the worst dog on earth. And
I try to give these nutters some the benefit of the doubt, but it looks like I'm wrong. Why do all these nutters think that it's cool to bring their dogs into the wildlife area to chase and accost the ducks? I don't get that. I don't get why people do this.
Well, they
get off.
So I really wish that you fucking people would realize that one fucking day, that someone's gonna get tired of this shit. And then the authorities are gonna get called, and then all kind of issues are gonna transpire because you idiots just don't get it. Stop bringing your dogs to wildlife areas. It's just dumb.
Yeah, and it's crazy that, well, it's interesting though, is that I mean, agree totally. I think, well, going back to like, why do they do it? I think as many of them get off on it. Remember last week, I guess it was last week, well, we were discussing, it was that quote self-defense case where the one dog person shot the pit bull that was attacking his dog. And, we're talking again, apparently the guy said that like he used the gun as a last resort. He pleaded and begged. There's a dozen, bystanders, to help them, and nobody did. As I kind of ran through, it's like, well, why, you see that quite often. Like, why are people so reluctant to get involved? Because I would not get involved with that either. So we reeled off the reasons. I said, well, one is that people have been brainwashed to believe that dog life is sacred and that no dog should ever be harmed for any reason, which I guess includes like for attacking another dog. And the other reason is, particularly say, like in my case, is that like, yeah, I don't want to go to prison for 5 years for shooting a dog that's attacking another dog. Sorry, not doing it. But Hunter has brought up a case too. She's like, well, is there some kind of like Roman Colosseum, type interest here? Like, do people, and then, it's like, oh yeah, because a light went on in my head. And it's like, yeah, some people, I mean, dog fighting, it's despite being illegal, it's still a very popular sport. Probably a few of them were like, oh, cool, dog fight. Let me just stand here and watch it play out. But they do. Many of them get off on the violence. They enjoy it. It's not happening by accident. Because if it did, it would only happen once, not over and over and over again.
And I'll tell you something else they enjoy. When you talk about flowing from the dog to the owner, how do you get off on picking up dog shit? Like, I mean, those are those dog owners that are responsible. Like, just picking up excrement in my hands, just even in a bag, does not ever sound appealing to me.
Well, yeah, that's not how I want to. I don't want to do that at 7 a.m. You know what I mean? Like, that's not.
Yeah. Particularly not if it's, if it's 30 degrees Fahrenheit and freezing rain out.
Dude, and that's, if I can say this really quick, for people that listen to this and think we're crazy, number one, people are dying because of dog ownership. Like, yep. Like that's the, and they're not just like passing away in their sleep or whatever. They're getting ripped apart. It's happening to children. It's happening to, vulnerable people. No one should have to die like that. And it's happening more and more and more. It's getting more and more common. We're seeing, and it's not, that's the most extreme case, but like, quality of life is declining across the board.
Well, that's the other thing too. Is like, yeah, I don't want to get. I mean, you're right, but I don't want to get, because, like I said, a lot of times you get, like, again, you dig into the band pit bulls, people that I like to beat up on. Death is not the only bad outcome, because it's
incessant barking, the value of your home. Like, when you try to sell your house and your neighbor's got an incessantly barking dog. Dude, every buyer is going to about face as soon as they hear that dog, and you are screwed.
Or even with dog attacks, it's like you got people with body parts missing.
Wait a minute. Not to interject real quick, and about not even just attacks. Let's say like with Cheapy's neighbor, when the dogs are shitting and pissing, and they destroy your property too.
Oh yeah. Well, the barking and the dog crap, we've covered that quite a bit. Whereas, like, there was I think remember Ban All Dogs? I think he's I was on hiatus or whatever, but that was like one of his complaints, was his next door neighbor. Like, the backyard was like completely dead. It was basically nothing but a crap and piss soaked mud puddle. Got a little background noise going there, but yeah, they just like destroyed.
Sounds like New Orleans. No,
yeah,
just kidding.
But that's but yeah,
I was just there. It was awesome.
They just destroy the land. But even with dog attacks, it's like I don't want to go in a direction where it's like, well, all we care about are people that get killed. Obviously, we do care, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Because you've got, even in the dangerous dog space, you got people like that little boy we discussed last week. I mean, he survived the attack, but you can see how he's living. He's basically just living in fear now. Right. He doesn't want to go outside. He's not playing with his friends. It's just his whole well-being has just been crushed by this, which again, totally unavoidable, right? I mean, the dog ran off property onto his and attacked him. I mean, it's totally, it's totally avoidable, but that kind of thing, needs to be part of the conversation also, because like I said, you've got all these quality of life issues also, where people are living in fear, neighborhoods are on lockdown, people can't sleep in their own homes. The list just goes on and on. So it's like we want to keep our eye on those balls also, not just the fatal attacks. So
yeah, so I guess like what I was trying to say in that was like, if people are wondering why, they try to pathologize our side of the fence, or act like, oh, we're just mean people, or we're bad people. They exaggerate all that. No, it's there are very real, very severe issues that are ongoing.
Oh yeah,
They're
absolutely.
caused by dogs that aren't being addressed, and we can point to them like ad infinitum. Like it's like the SpongeBob meme where he pulls back the wallpaper and there's all the diapers. It's like there's like you can get mad all you want and call us all the names you want and act like we're just pathologize our position, because you can't win the argument. So that's kind of like, I think it's important to like talk about the reason why. Like, why are you like this? It's not a preference thing. It's not like I just don't like blue shirts. It's like, no, there's like a clear reason that this is, the situation can't continue.
Well, yeah, because you have people, like I say often, like people have very real, very personal reasons for being in the space, right? Because even if you go back to like this that we discussed earlier, it's like, I mean, there's cases where a dog will actually force its way into homes and attack people. So somebody just minding their own business in their own space is somehow terrorizing the dog. But try to like say this to that person, right? You're never going to convince them that, well, I mean, a lot of this is just basically set up for victim blaming. That's what they're doing. It's a passive aggressive victim blame. It's like, well, you know what? If you hadn't been sitting in your living room, watching reruns of Fantasy Island, it wouldn't have happened. It's like, get the fuck out of here with that shit. It's terrible what they say, but that's the thing. And that's why the argument never goes anywhere. They're never going to convince me that dogs in society aren't a problem, or that pit bulls are nanny dogs. Have you listened? It was, well, I guess it was last year. It was about a month ago. I got like almost attacked by two pit bulls on the same day. It was two different dogs, two different owners. Both of them tried to take a chunk out of me. I mean, literally, I was about max 2 seconds from going pew pew. That's how the one dog was so aggressive that the owner had pulled back on the harness so hard, the dog like got flipped over backwards. That's how much Rover wanted to take a chunk out of me. And they just say, well, he could tell you were a bad person. But so what if I'm a bad person?
Well, the other point is, look at it real quick. Nothing else goes out of its way to do what mutts do.
Yeah.
They go out of their way to beg for food. They absolutely go out of their way to beg for food. They go out of their way to attack people. They go out of their way to harass people. They go out of their way to invade your space. They go out of their way to fucking molest you. It's like, what is it that intrusive parasite doesn't do that's forceful, that it forces itself on you? For attention,
and they like,
for love.
It's like this
everything.
Cartoon world where they're like, when their dog jumps all over you, it's like, oh, he just wanted to give you a kiss. Okay, I'm gonna jump all over you and do the same thing and like lick your face and all that. and we're gonna see real quick. Like I don't want that to happen to me. Like I don't give a shit what the dog
straight
wants.
up.
I would be left alone.
Yeah, like right on, Rodney. Like, let me go on a date and I'm so horny, I'm gonna start jumping and trying to hump the chick right when I see her. Let's see how that works in society.
Right.
Let me start licking all over her face and shit.
Yeah, like why is
Come
it
on.
acceptable if the dog like maybe to use a less like over the top example, but like screaming. If I go out in my backyard and scream at the neighbor's house at the top of my lungs, as long as I can hold out, there's going to be an authority figure show up pretty quick, because that's not okay. Why is it okay for your dog to do it? And I don't really care.
Hungry. Yeah, and your neighbor just went shopping. Let me go jump and kick in your door and eat all your food up because I'm hungry.
Yeah, or my favorite one is, well, what if I go shit in your yard? Is that cool? You know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
I just had to go.
Let me have a case of the super runs after some great Mexican food.
Exactly.
And go right to your yard and just leave it all on the front porch.
Well, it's okay when your dog does it. I mean, aren't you into that? Like, you like following people around picking up poop. You can pick some of mine up today. It's just like how does this not? And it's really just selfishness is what it is. Like it's some weird kind of like inability to empathize with other people or think like, am I being annoying? Am I causing problems for people? Maybe I shouldn't do that. There's something that's like short circuiting in their brain. And
there's zero sense of do unto others.
yeah.
Right.
And like I'll say this really quick, even though it's a little non sequitur. We kind of like vented about like, hey, we're not in this space because we have some irrational feeling like this is a very real, tangible problem that is not being addressed and it's being exacerbated, right?
Yep.
So we talked about that. We talked about the problems with them. But I would say, as someone who did grow up with dogs off and on, oh my God, dude, when you get out, they were responsible, we could say, dog owners. Or skewed more responsible than the average one. But dude, when you like move out and you don't have to do like dog shit, like the daily life of a dog person, like you're not stressed out because the dog's freaking out barking at a squirrel, like a daily occurrence that just happens. You think they'd get used to it at some point, like the dog is ruining the piece of the home. You can walk in your home without an animal trying to bolt out and take off in the neighborhood that now you have to try to go catch.
Yeah.
You're not picking up shit at 7:30 in the morning in 20-degree weather. Just on and on. You're not being jumped on. Your clothes don't have dog hair on it. You're not paying the bills. Like I just would like. There's dog people out there that know in their heart that like this doesn't work. Like they've made a mistake and we've got to just like, I don't know, maybe let them know like it is better, dude. It is get a goldfish, get a cat. Like you've made a mistake. You've got to turn around. It's not too late. Like that nagging feeling. You can't go to anybody's house. You can't take good vacations. You're chained to this. Just set yourself free, man. Like it's, I feel like a decent percentage of them, the ones with the, what, I don't know, past like a basic IQ test or whatever. There's a group of them out there that know deep in their heart that like something's not right, Like,
yeah. Well, I think there was that, what was it, USA Today or I forget, it was some major publication did a survey and of dog owners, and it turns out that 54% stated that they regretted getting the dog. Now, here's a problem with that is that, it's so taboo to say something like that. Like, okay, Rover really isn't my best friend. The number's probably a lot higher because you've probably got people that would never admit it, even anonymously. But even if you just take that at face value, that's still pretty significant, I think. But
yeah, like this is a bad bad lifestyle choice. Like for 90% of people, this is a bad decision.
Well,
Like,
because the thing is that they, that you got people, again, bringing dogs into environments that they're just not suited to, right? Like, I mean, like we were talking about, I mean, I think one real common sense, rather than like with BSL, rather than restrict a couple of dog breeds, what you would do is, or what I would do is say, okay, all dogs over 25 pounds, all of them, because then that kind of takes a breed ID game off the table, are now zoned out farm animals, meaning that they're out of apartments, they're out of suburban subdivisions. You got to have at least one fenced in acre, say. So I'm not saying I'm just throwing it out there as an idea, right? Because that's the thing is they bring dogs into, these like really densely populated areas. And it's just among other things, there's an animal welfare issue because they get these really high energy working dogs and cram it into an apartment or into a small suburban yard. And what does it do? Well, it goes ape shit. It barks all the time. It destroys property. It's constantly running loose or trying to. And it's just a bad idea. But yeah, it's like dog cultists generally promote the notion that yes, dog ownership is for everybody. You have a right to own any dog you want, anywhere you want, and do whatever you want with it, which is nuts.
Oliver, yeah, every dog shelter is at capacity for two reasons. They have abandoned the practice of euthanasia, which is a completely responsible thing you do.
Yep.
It's one of those things. It's like, does it feel great? No, but there's a lot of shit we do that doesn't feel great to keep society functioning. You know what I mean? So they're not doing that. They have to be a no-kill shelter with a 90% no-kill rate or whatever it is, which is totally ridiculous. Yep. But the other reason the shelters are overflowing is we've reached dog saturation. Everybody that wants one has one, and half the people that have them realize they don't want them anymore. Yep. So like the shelters keep overflowing, and that's what's wild to me is the push. Just looking into the shelter stuff, I didn't realize this, but I thought Tiger King was crazy. About like the wild exotic animal trade and people setting up sketchy nonprofits for tigers, and like that was pretty wild. Oh, the dog thing is another level. These are like the most this is crazy, like looking into the dog adoption scams. And I mean, at this point, GoFundMe is like aiding and abetting like rampant fraud. You want to make a quick $5,000, say your dog needs an operation, like, and put up a GoFundMe and congratulations, cash out. Like all these little dog charities are just like half of them at least are just totally like fraudulent. Like,
yeah, we should get, one thing we should do is like, one angle of attack could be one is to sick the IRS on these people because, again, these charities, at least supposedly, have all kinds of regulations, right? Particularly like, to meet your, 503C or 50C3 or whatever it is, obligations, you have to, it stipulates certain things, right? Like, they're not just like, take the money and run type operations. IRS, or even DOJ, all kinds of, should be going after these people. But again, it seems like anything that's done in the name of dog is deemed legit by default. But I think that would be a good angle of attack, would be to, go after those people, because they're scammers, they're fraudsters. But the scams work often because, many dog lovers are so gullible. Say, oh no, yeah, my Rover needs a, $80,000 like ass lift, and the GoFundMe money just pours in. Maybe they may not even have a dog.
Yeah, totally.
Well,
And
also, a couple points there. The first point is I don't get it. Like what Rodney said, you also have to look at it. The first point, okay, like Rodney said, it's not the fact that they have one dog, is that one dog is the bare minimum. Because for some reason they always seem to get another dog because the other dog gets lonely, and then you have two retarded toddlers teaching themselves the world, which doesn't work.
Yeah, or
And the
3
other
or
point
4 or
is
5. Yeah, it's like, well, it's one dog. It isn't good enough. It's you gotta
yeah.
Dogs make everything better. So you say, okay, what's the nature of your problem? It's like, well, my dog is driving me crazy. Say, got the answer. Get another dog.
And then the other part is what you said. It's a very good point that's never been brought up. Is where's all this money going? So you're telling me that you need all this money for shelters for dogs that's overrun. So where is the money going? Because after a while, you have to understand that you've spent the plateau of the money, but you're still accepting major amounts of donations.
Yeah.
yeah,
I guess,
and I guess it's it's a self-perpetuating problem, because anytime you propose to correct it, you have to cloak yourself as being pro dog. Well, I just want what's best for the dogs, and having them in a crowded shelter is not what's best for them. So, we should euthanize the completely unadoptable dogs that have mauled 3 people, and they're not going anywhere. Like, you always have to cloak it as, well, I'm arguing for the dog, instead of just saying, like, look, I'm approaching it from common sense. This is stupid. Your feelings don't really matter. Like, this is a problem. This is how we solve it, right? So,
yep.
everything is cloaked in what's best for the dog, right? And then instead of cutting the knot and just being like, no, I'm going to tell you no. So that's problem one. And problem two is with these little like adoption groups or whatever. The supply of dogs is so great, and they are reproducing at such a like insane rate, and people are surrendering them at such a high rate, that whoever is running these shelters is just incentivized to saddle people with as many dogs as possible to get them out of the door.
Yeah.
So that's where you go from 2 dogs to 3 dogs. Two is, if you ever look into the adoption programs, very often they're giving you like the craziest like sales pitch ever to get you, like, how do I get you off this lot in a car? Like, how do I get you out of here with like 4 dogs that I know are a terrible fit for your household, that I know have been mauling people. We haven't reported it. They've been vicious towards employees. Like, they're just trying to get the dogs out of the shelter because there's so many. It's just like a never-ending problem. It's compounding on itself.
Yep. Yeah. And you're right, because nobody wants to bite the bullet and do the right thing. And you said something interesting just now, but I think that's the way it's going to wind up having to be, is that you can't, like, these people function at a very, very low level, right? And I think it is that we brought up the archetypes of dog nutters. But I think one thing almost all of them have in common is a very low maturity level. They're sort of stuck at, like, emotionally at age 4, say, right? They've got a Disney-esque worldview, probably due to, bad upbringing, poor socialization, overconsumption of media, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? But that, whatever, that said, that's the case. But when you're dealing with a 4-year-old, you don't try to reason things out with them. You just tell them this is the way it's going to be. So, like, if the 4-year-old says, okay, why can't Rover go to the theme park with us? one thing you could say, okay, here's a laundry list of reasons why it's a bad idea. Or you could just say, well, that's because mommy and daddy say so. And I think that, yeah, that's what it's going to come down to in the end is that we're just going to say, look, this is just the way it's going to be, and if you don't, you can go, cry and piss and moan and carry on all you want. That happens even with dealing with individual dog people. It's like, look, I'm
Like
not going to.
we're not spending. There's a county that like a lot of America. There's several counties like this actually where the water mains are breaking, and businesses are shut down for like 10 to 30 days. There's not a functional like public safety. So, there's all these competing needs that like actually matter to people, quality of life, the economy, whatever, right? They're struggling with these things, but they won't put money into that, but they will put your tax money. They don't care about spending the money. It's not their money. They stole it from you in taxes, right? So it's like they will spend like 10 million bucks on a new dog shelter that is already at capacity before they break ground. Like as soon as they finish it, it's going to be full. So like you've got to be able to tell those people, no, we're not spending $10 million on this. We're not throwing another dime after you don't throw good money after bad, right? Like we're not going to keep doing it. We're going to do what needs to be done, which is, I would probably ban the sale of dogs or put a moratorium on it, on like just breeding in general. Like it can't be profitable. And then I would say, no kill has gotten us into a giant mess. We need to kind of start taking a more
Probably
reasonable
the
tack on it.
simplest thing to do is just start juicing them again. Do what they did back in the 70s, right? The dog didn't get to stay in the pound forever.
Right. Well, adding to Rodney's point, you're right. When does it stop? Like you're trying, like that just blows my mind what you just said. You're building a shelter and you've already projected. You already have the numbers down that you're going to be past capacity before you eat.
Yeah, and cities are issuing bonds and stuff for like people don't really know what's happening at the county and city level because it's boring and it's not fun to look into. Netflix is better, right? I get it, but
why would you even think that's cool? Like you're humanizing dogs while dehumanizing your fellow human being.
And if you look into the adoption scams, it's like, dude, this dog is like a 3-4 time felon, and you're telling this family with a kid, oh, it'll be great for your family, it'll be great around your cat. It's like, no, dude, this and they always come up with some stupid, they don't call it a pit bull. Like a pit bull is a general category of dog. We all know what they are. They reclassify it as some more exotic, some name that doesn't have quite as much baggage with it. And then the family walks in thinking, okay, like I want this kind of dog for my family. And then the employee or the volunteer, whoever's running the adoption racket, is just like foisting this, like a 3-time like violent felon dog.
Well, the thing to do with that is that was, old school also, and not even that old. I'm not going back to the Middle Ages. You go back 1970s, 1980s. It was pretty unusual for a dog that mauled to be allowed to live. Man, to say it never happened, but that was the common sense thing, was that the dog got juice. So yeah, you know what? Every dog with a bite history should get juiced. So what does that do? Well, that brings the population way down. These are known dangerous dogs. And when the pit nutters come out, it's like, look, we're basing, we're acting, we're basically judging each individual dog based on its behavior. It's not like bigoted or racist or any of that other crap, right? Because that's helpful. Yeah, probably right. 70-80% of them are going to be pit bulls. I mean lab mixes and bulldog crosses and all that kind of stuff. But so yeah, you need to start, juicing. I mean, give me to say too is like, yeah, any dog that's been in the shelter more than 30 days, and if it doesn't behave dangerously, that gets the juice, right? So now you've come down. You don't need to endlessly do these shelter build outs. We've stopped the dangerous dog trafficking. So probably dog bites will plummet and perhaps other problems with dogs in society. But yeah, the problem is, I mean, in terms of like the shelter, scenarios, what you have at the intersection of no-kill policies and unrestricted breeding. So that's where you have, well, it's the intersection, is where you have this specific vertical, as you would call it. So at least one of those things needs to change. We need to reverse no-kill policies and go back to something more sensible, like say 40 years ago. Or we need to restrict breeding, right? But that's the kind of thing, yeah, there's never, like in politics, there's always trade-offs, but there's never the trade-off. Like I would say, like, let's say I would never sign off on no-kill as a policy, but let's say I had some ridiculous amount of political pressure to do it. It says, okay, I'm only going to sign off on no kill. Like I want a bill that's like with a couple of things in it then. I want like very, very strict limits on breeding. And I mean like very strict, because that's the problem is to say, okay, well, yeah, if your unspayed pit bull has 17 puppies, it's like a $50 fine or something. Nobody gives a shit about that. The AAC is not even going to write a ticket. No, it's like $1,000 or $5,000 per dog. You watch that.
One night in jail. One night in jail will correct a lot of behavior. You know what I mean? Like instead of a fine, you'll never collect. It's like, no, you're going to jail for like 24 hours, and then we'll talk when you get out how you feel about it. Like just something that's kind of like.
Well, that's the thing, though, is like there has to be like draconian punishment, so they're not going to get it, unfortunately. But you could also just like forget about that. It's like breed all the puppies. Yeah, breed them up, drop them off at the shelter. We got plenty of juice. We got a big tanker truck full of Euthasol out here, and
you've got to it's the cleanup side. You've got to clean up the because. Yeah, man, and they're all like, I think most of the shelters are swarmed with pit mixes because we can't have like I don't know if it's delayed adolescence or what, or maybe there's a broader thing where socially we're just a lot of people in America are drunk on language. They repeat these mindless mantras that don't really mean anything. They're just thought terminating cliches. It's not the dog, it's the owner. Well, what does that even mean? You know what I mean? So, but you can't have an honest conversation about a problem without some idiot completely hijacking it and turning it into this emotional thing.
Yeah.
Like, look, there's a like what I'm about to say is like almost heresy. It's the shelters are full. Most of them are pit mixes. And you know why? Because they're bad pets and people don't want them. They don't want them. They don't work.
They're America's favorite dog to get rid of.
Right. And like you can't state obvious things like that. Like, guess what? You know why they're full? It's not. The main driver of it isn't like, oh, backyard breeders or what? Like, yeah, that's part of it. Like that's where they're coming from. That's the source. But the real reason that there's so many stray, like, we're focusing on pits now because those are the worst offenders. But there's the real reason there's so many strays, the shelters are overflowing, blah blah. It's because they are terrible animals to share living space with. They just are. If they were great, if they were good for people, oh man, the shelters would be empty. Everybody'd be signing up for one. Like, dude, this thing shits like Yeah, like $5 gold pieces, and
Yeah.
it's like doing the dishes and all. You know, it's like it makes my grass grow better. Sign me up for that. No, dude,
Yeah,
the shelters,
they
yeah.
it was a lot of things, even if you just focus, and again, I don't want to just focus on pit bulls, but even if you do, there's even, you can go back to the death thing. There's a lot of problems with them that go beyond. I mean, it's probably overlapping, right? You've got the Venn diagram of overlapping circles, but the whole, reported death thing is really just the tip of the iceberg, even just with pit bulls, because you've got the reckless overbreeding. And one issue there is that, I believe it's a fact that pit bulls have exceptionally large litters. I don't know what the average is, and now I'm like reluctant to ask the AI bot what it is, but they have very, very large litters. So you have, but it's a conflict, irresponsible owners. They don't get them spayed and neutered. They're not able to contain them properly because, yeah, they're very strong. They're able to climb fences, break through doors and walls and so forth, and all that kind
And
of.
the owners are low agency people. Like they just
Yep.
are. You can run as many free spay and neuter programs as you want all day. You're talking
They won't
about,
do it.
yeah,
Get
yeah, like
multiple.
dude, like they like that requires someone to physically get up, put the dog in the car, drive it somewhere. Seems easy, doesn't seem like the hardest thing in the world, but even that is too much. I mean, these are people that don't care enough about their neighbor to bring the dog inside when it's barking all day, or put it
Yep.
on a leash so it doesn't kill somebody. Like you're expecting them to be able to do that, and it's just beyond them. It's just beyond
Yeah.
them as people. You know,
Yep.
it's
I guess
like
it is, but
yeah.
it really goes back to, yeah, they really are just like, they're low lives. They really are.
I mean, it kind of like keeps circling. Like I don't know what else you call it. It's like and they're always like, well, pit bulls can be great pets if they have proper training. I can point to like case after case after case after case where a quote unquote certified professional super dog owner that's gone through all the courses and stuff has had their pit bull, their German, whatever, maul someone. So no,
Yeah.
like we have examples where people have done the pit bulls and parolees person who watched the show, was convinced to get a pit bull, did everything she was told to do, was a quote unquote model owner, and the animal still murdered her 3-year-old child.
Yep.
Who loved that dog. That dog was showered with beyond love, worship, and devotion, and
Yep.
it still killed the kid. So you
Yep.
can't tell me that it's. We've done the A/B test. Basically, that argument's out the window, and it's just part of like these. It's just like this sick like childishness in people. Someone who can't like adult is actually an awful thing to watch.
Yep.
And they can't like acknowledge like, hey, like there's things about life and reality that are not nice to acknowledge, but you have to acknowledge them. You can't just like stick your fingers in your ears and say, repeat the thought terminating cliche
But
and say,
that's what's
yeah,
interesting is, like, even dog, like certified dog experts can't handle these dogs, but yet they're still being handed out. That's probably true with a lot of these dogs. Sometimes they'll even say you bring up other murder mutts like Praces or Corsos or Rots. But the answer is, it's like, well, that's a different class of owner. Like, they're more knowledgeable about the dog's traits and all that kind of stuff. But because, okay, so now you're saying that really the owner is a factor in the outcome. Plus the fact is, like, you had nobody. I don't even know what to say. It's like nobody responsible would even consider owning one of these things at all. Yeah, I had the thought, you might appreciate this
exactly.
analogy. You know what these dogs are like? They're kind of like unexploded ordnance. You're aware of that problem where you
Yes,
have,
yes.
where, well, either a war's been fought, or perhaps a live fire range used by the military. You have unexploded bombs and artillery shells and hand grenades and the like, and they're very, very unstable. They tell people to stay the hell away from that stuff, right? Because it's really dangerous. And there was a case in 2008 where a guy, you could Google this happened. It was in 2008, I think, in Virginia. A guy got blown up by, they think it was a Civil War mortar round. He was basically an amateur archaeologist, so he was, out hunting, his metal detector, got a hit, found this artifact, took it home, and it blew up and killed him. The bomb squad tested the residue and the the chemical residues and the shrapnel and the like, and they guesstimated that the device had been made in like the 1860 to 1870 time frame. So it was definitely some kind of Civil War bomb. But that's the thing with those, is like, they're unpredictable. You don't know what it's going to do. You could sit there and bang on it with a hammer all day and maybe nothing will happen. Or you could just step within 10 feet of it and boom, it blows up and, kills somebody. And, but that's kind of like the same thing. It's like, there's no response. Well, except for perhaps the Army engineers that dispose of the things, there's no responsible ownership of something like that, because you can't really control the outcome. So
yeah, like, it's not like a gun or something where it, whatever. People like to compare it to guns a lot, or like a car.
Yeah.
Right. Like an inanimate thing that, like, cars are dangerous as hell, but it's not going to do something you don't make it do in some way.
Yeah, it's only behaved upon.
Yeah, it's a tool, it's something, it's an inanimate object, right? Like, it's not going to do something you don't make it do. So, like, whatever, you know what I mean? Like, there's all kinds of dangerous things out there that, razor blades, like, I had to you got to put your straight razor up so your kid doesn't play, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
stuff like that, where it's not just going to jump off the counter and, like, cut somebody, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, knife, all that shit. Do you get what I'm saying? Dogs, I mean, it's a whole other category. There's no way you can take responsible precautions. Like, when people have a kid, they plug the outlets up. You put the plugs in the outlet. Electricity is dangerous, so you take precautions, and it's not dangerous anymore. You don't have to, like, live without electricity because you got kids in the house or whatever. You can mitigate the risk, right? Um, but dogs, you can't do that. There's no way. Like, they're so dangerous, and then the potential problems they can cause are so great. It's like, dude, you can build an 8-foot fence. That dog will get over it, get under it to go kill, your neighbor, right? Like,
Yep.
I guess I'm kind of diarrhea of the mouth here, but I can't think of a way that, like, you can totally idiot proof it. And then they always, compare it to, like, cats or something. It's like, dude, that's not how this works. They're really closer to tigers than anything, some other crazy dangerous animal that you wouldn't get near under normal circumstances. Why are we just accepting that, these things are different somehow? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, they're the furry Jesus. Tigers aren't. So
Yeah,
hey, I'd like to wrap up this segment. There was something else I wanted to talk about. I know it's a really good topic, but I think
can I answer that point?
yeah, you could, Mr. J, you get close out this topic before we get to the next one. Yeah.
I think what really needs to be scrubbed off the list is this one bite rule. Once we get rid of the one bite rule, everything changes, because we don't get, like Rodney said, I don't get a one free vehicular manslaughter. So why should a dog get one free bite? It's not one free bite. It's one free tearing somebody to pieces. You get one free attack. I don't get to have one free physical outburst. So why should they get a pass? Once a lot of these bills get walked back, these talking points, these free attacks these animals get, these non-animals get, then a lot of things will change.
Yeah. And often the policy is to give it more than one bite, right? So really it's like a 3 or 4 or 5 or 12 bite rule. I want to move on to the next topic. One thing I say, there've been a bunch of dog bite related fatalities this week, but the most recent one on dogs bite is this one. And I'm sure Colleen's probably trying to get caught up because she does a ton of due diligence on these. It's scholarly work is what it is. But this is interesting because going back to the whole Animal Uncontrol situation. So this was interesting. It was an unreported dog bite fatality from 2023. It was from 2 years ago. And it kind of goes to the point that we really don't have good statistics on this stuff because there's really no standardized reporting. There's all sorts of incentives or motives to cover this stuff up. But here's what happened. And I think this was basically off the radar until recently when a lawsuit was filed in, conjunction with it. So here's what happens. A couple weeks ago, a daughter and granddaughter of a 90-year-old woman killed by her son's pack of vicious dogs in 2023 filed a federal lawsuit against the city of Pharr, Texas, seeking $100 million in damages. Woohoo. The plaintiff has brought the action against the city for gross failure of its public works division to protect Estella Manteca from a foreseeable and preventable attack by a large pack of vicious dogs owned by her son with whom she resided. So these were dogs that were in the home. Okay, now what's interesting about this, you go back to like one bite rules. Even with a one bite rule, what happens with a second bite is often, there's all this due process. Well, the dog's declared dangerous and the owner has to keep it muzzled in public and they got to get extra insurance and blah, 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 blah. So all 4 dogs involved had been declared vicious by the city a year earlier for attacking another person. So these dogs had priors, okay? The complaint alleges the city exhibited a pattern of deliberate indifference, neglecting to take reasonable measures to mitigate the known and escalating threat. Indeed, ultimately resulting in the tragic and avoidable injuries on January 10, 2023. And her death that's what happened, because she was attacked on January 10. Talk about like pain and suffering. This poor woman lingered in the hospital in agony for 4 months? So yeah, the attack was on January 10 and her death was on May 6. So that was when the actual dog bite related fatality occurred. And like I said, it's like, let's not get too focused on the deaths, because then we're in a ridiculous situation where anything other than that is somehow acceptable, and it isn't. So if she'd survived, would say, oh, this is just perfectly fine. No, it isn't. It's like, seriously, like me, I'd rather just die on the spot than deal with 4 months of intense suffering. So, well, here's what happened. Manteca sustained catastrophic injuries in the violent dog attack while leaving her in a coma and requiring the amputation of both legs, which ultimately led to her death. Her arms, chewed to the bone, underwent extensive skin graft procedures that failed to heal adequately. And medical experts anticipated that they too might have required amputation had she survived. So if she had survived, it would have been with no arms and no legs. So the complaint shows her graphic injury. So complaint states that Manteca was a vulnerable citizen, fearful and intimidated by her son, because her son was living with her and these were his dogs. So elderly and fragile condition create an environment of heightened danger. Both facts were made known to city officials by family members. On January 24th, 2022, this is about a year before the attack, the city declared the dogs vicious. Again, like I said earlier, requiring confinement, a leash, muzzle, proper signage, and insurance. But the city failed to follow up to ensure compliance with these requirements. Of course they did, allowing the danger to persist unchecked. So like I said, if they'd actually like enforced this ruling, the dogs would have been removed sooner. But that's what they do, is they say, okay, here are the stipulations, but then they just forget about it, right? They're just done. They do not want to address the matter further. So, 4 days before the attack, the city issued a notice of impoundment for destruction of the one dog, Ringo, for a separate attack. Despite this urgent notice, the city failed to act, leaving the dog and the other dangerous dogs in the property, where they would later fatally maul Manteca, states a complaint. The actions and inactions of the defendants, which is the city, constitute egregious misconduct and a pattern of reckless disregard for the safety and welfare of residents under their care. So, so here's more from the complaint. Defendants exhibited flagrant incompetence in their handling of the repeated reports concerning the dangerous dogs. The appalling neglect demonstrated by failing to enact timely measures to protect Manteca is indicative of a severe breach of duty. So, I would just shorten this. So basically, they're like animal control everywhere else, essentially. So this is like your typical, maybe worse than average, but not unheard of. Such inexcusable oversight not only heightened the imminent risk faced by Manteca, but also ultimately led to her tragic and avoidable death. By consistently disregarding reports of dangerous conditions and ignoring the known threat posed by the 4 dogs, the defendants displayed a blatant failure to act. Now, there's another, I've mentioned this a few times. There is a case in Ohio last decade where a woman, her name was Kalonda Ritchie, was mauled to death by her neighbor's dogs. So it's the difference between that and this was Ritchie was mauled by her neighbor's dogs. Like, she didn't live with them. This woman was mauled by dogs that were in the home. So I don't know if that's really a material difference or not, but the complaint was, in Ritchie's case, her estate sued the city of Dayton and was awarded $3.5 million in damages due to like this kind of thing, like incompetence, negligence, lack of oversight, disregarding, official reports, not taking the proper measures, breach of duty, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're also doing that, Pam Rock, and I don't know what the status of that lawsuit is. She was a postal worker that was mauled to death a couple of years ago. Her family is suing the county of Putnam for the same kind of thing. Again, gross negligence, essentially, in dealing with these matters. So, but here's what's interesting. It said, suing a city or county requires piercing governmental immunity. This process is meant to be formidable, or else cities would be mired in endless litigation, where taxpayers would be forced to compensate an endless number of tort victims. Further, no government entity, no city, county, state, or the federal government can be sued on grounds that it is not consented to. That is, the king can do no wrong, which is an age-old legal maxim. In this case, it appears that there is no Texas statute that would authorize this lawsuit. Thus, the plaintiff's attorneys have turned to the Civil Rights Act. An email corresponds with dog bite attorney Kenneth Phillips about this lawsuit. He shared, when the defendant is a city in this case, the grounds must be set forth in a statute. For example, in Alvarado versus City of Los Angeles, the grounds for the thrust of the case were established by a statute that said any city can be sued if it fails to do a mandatory duty. Okay. And now in Alvarado, the city broke the state's statutory mandatory dog bite disclosure law by not disclosing the bite history of the dog to the adopter. And this was another, shelter fail. Was apparently, you see, what's being expressed here is that in California, you are required by law to disclose the dog bite history to the adopter, and they didn't do it. And they probably couched it in some, passive aggressive, euphemistic language. Well, Rover is reactive. Rover is better in a home without children, right? Meaning that the dog has attacked children and will continue. So that's interesting. So I guess I got to find out, what was the city of Pharr, what did they have the statutory obligation to do that they didn't? So that's the interesting. So what filed?
That's why it feels like a long shot in this one, because I guess Pharr did kind of the son's dogs were vicious and aggressive at one point, right? And that was known to the city, we could say.
Yep.
But were they they weren't taken back in by the city and readopted out to someone without the city explaining hey, these dogs are, known to be dangerous or anything. They were returned to the owner, and the owner brought them into the mom's house. So it's really almost like her estate would have to sue her son, because
yeah,
unless there's something on the books in Texas that says hey, no free dog bites. If a dog bites somebody or it gets aggressive, you take it in, you put it down like people used to do, whatever. And then if they fail to do that, which is required of the city by some law, right? Yeah, then you could sue them. But I'm not a lawyer, but I don't see how they prevail in this one.
Yeah, and what's interesting is it's a federal case. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
And to add to that point, here's the other thing. If we ship them from state to state, we could lose the paperwork. So the paperwork could get lost in the shuffle. So yeah, I could see a lot of holes in this too.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, that was, but they make the point though. Yeah, that when this didn't involve a shelter rehoming, but
I'm saying for future cases, not this particular one.
Well, yeah, I mean, you'd have to, I guess, if the laws change. But I think what's interesting one thing that's interesting about this case is that there were dogs that were actually in the home, right? So,
this is checking all the boxes for the perfect storm.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, but that's a problem.
I want them to win. I'm on their side.
Totally. Yeah,
it's a long shot because, and overall, I think that the best possible thing people can be doing is to start suing cities, because that's the only way it changes. I mean, and as the dog problem continues to get worse, this is going to keep happening. And cities need to be on notice. Look, you've got to enact common sense rules and regulations to keep your citizens safe, man. Otherwise, or at the very least, keep the city from getting sued for millions of dollars, because it's more of this is coming. People are going to continue to sue. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and particularly
it's bring an awareness to what we've been trying to get from number one is the spotlight on this issue that they keep trying to shove under the rug, shove it under the rug, shove it under the rug. Hopefully nobody says anything about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly right. And the reason we have like laws and city ordinances and stuff like that, like the reason you've got like building codes and stuff is because people couldn't be trusted to like handle the issue on their own and self-regulate. The problem kept happening. This problem keeps happening. It's actually happening more and more. The problem's getting worse. It is growing. So now you have to make, you got to make a law for it and say, okay, well, we couldn't have a common sense, like normal, behavior out of people. So now we have to tell you what you have to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think the thing, though, I mean, I agree. The thing here, though, but again, it goes back to, I bring up the point, it's canine immunity, because even in this case where you have multiple laws being broken, court orders being ignored, nothing's done about it. So, like in this case, it's like, they had, the judge had stipulated, because the dogs had attacked prior. The judge made a bunch of stipulations, but there was never any follow-up that those be followed. See, that's the kind of the whole problem is that really you've got a gross lack of enforcement in this space.
That's what I probably missed when you're originally reading it. So what are the general facts? Like the son's dogs were known to be vicious, they were taken in or whatever, and then what happened, legally what happened?
Well, I don't think they were taken in at all. I believe they attacked. We could like really do a deep dive, but they'd had the thing, and there was some place in here it states that what the stipulation. Right. Well, there was a 4 days before the attack, there was a notice of impoundment for the one dog. That was just the one dog. So here it says in January, this was like, a year before the attack, the city declared the dogs vicious, requiring confinement, a leash, muzzle, proper signage, and insurance. But there was no follow-up on that. Right. So it's a kind of thing like, adding to this doesn't do anything if they're not going to follow up on it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Or adding more laws. Apparently they do have vicious dog laws, but if they're not, if the policy is just
meaningless.
Yeah. They're just dead letters essentially. So you've got law, and even I've seen that here. You've got situations where laws are clearly being broken and nobody does anything about it. I was kind of hoping.
That's an interesting one. I think that's kind of the central thing from what I've gathered, what we've been able to summarize as far as the facts are is, like if you're like, let's say, a district attorney or whatever, I don't know that you can sue that person for just not enforcing laws that are on the books.
Well, yeah, the lawsuit's against the city. I don't think that they're not suing any government.
Yeah, but just like as an example, like as like a government body, doesn't enforce its own regulations it's supposed to enforce or doesn't. Yeah, that's where it's a little tricky. You know what I mean?
Well, the thing is, but that's if you want, maybe in the background, because I find this stuff interesting, is dig into the Kalonda Ritchie case. And I blogged extensively about that. But thing is, her estate sued the city of Dayton and got $3.5 million in damages. So, that's not exactly, chicken feed. But that was the nature of that complaint, was that, the authorities had a duty to, enforce these regulations, and they didn't do it. And it wasn't just once either. It wasn't like she called 911 and the cops, the ambulance got there 5 minutes too late. That's not what happened. She had complained about those dogs, and this included video evidence, 60 times. 60 times. And the most that Animal Control ever did was they would go and they would put like a sticky note on the dog owner's door. That's it. So you had, and again, these people were because you had dog at large, dog behaving dangerously, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just like, that case was truly an outrage. But that's the kind of thing is that, I mean, if you can sue the city for something, like, that's it. Because I think the gross negligence, at that point, you could almost say the authorities were enablers, like they were accomplices in her murder. Because that's how I saw that. They actually, they're like, they just sort of passively, aggressively allowed that to play out. So
there's so basically, just summarizing it really quick, because I read through it, the dogs were deemed dangerous by the city. Like, the city had already deemed those animals as, like, dangerous dogs. So they were known to the city. There's stipulations that come with having a dog that's deemed dangerous. And the city was being like the family was begging the city to come enforce its own laws.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And they just didn't. Like, they straight up just ignored it.
Yep.
So that kind of might be what it all hinges on is, I don't know, like, can a city or a government, refuse to enforce its own rules? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, at some point, I mean, it's just my thought. It might not mean anything legally, but at some point, the authorities become enablers. I mean, they're actually part of the problem. And I think that's probably the case in a lot of these, quote, animal uncontrol situations. Stuff like this is how I came up with my handle, because like they almost do everything. It's not even so much like, okay, they're overwhelmed. Like, again, it's not a case of the cops showing up 5 minutes after the victim has been killed. That's not the kind of thing I'm talking about. It's like they actually go out of their way to do nothing, right? They're like worse than useless. I think they're accomplices. And that's what happens when you have, people in authority who are dog nutters. Probably the kind of thing they're not going to, again, they didn't meet these stipulations. So what normally would happen is you'd think they'd be impounded and or euthanized. But again, if you've got no kill policies and a shelter that's at 300% capacity, then they're not going to do that. Like, they can't. I mean, in a sense, but so I guess, maybe it's a conflict, because maybe they could hide behind that. They could say, you know what? Oh, that reminded me of another thing. But there's another case also in Texas. The Ramon Najera was killed by his neighbor's dogs. I guess, what was that, about a year ago? And that family is suing the city. I think that was in Austin, but don't quote me on that. They're suing, the city.
I think that was San Antonio.
San Antonio. Okay, maybe San Antonio. But in any case, they're suing the city for the same kind of thing. But what's interesting about that was that the authorities are sort of hiding behind the bureaucracy, because people are saying, the plaintiffs, these dogs have been terrorizing the neighborhood for years. We're saying that, like, look, we kept reporting this stuff and nothing was done about it. But the city is saying that it wasn't properly reported. In other words, phoning it in or even giving sworn testimony isn't good enough. You have to go to Animal Control when it's open. You have to, swear out an affidavit and have it notarized. Maybe you don't have to do all that, but there's all these like hoops you have to jump through to get the incident properly reported. Right? Like, it's not like, okay, a cop comes and takes your statement and fills out the report. At least there, that's not how it works. If you want a report filed, you have to, again, there's all this extra process controls. What I talk about, it's another protection that's afforded to dogs and their owners. Right, because if you report any other crime, that's handled completely differently. But if it's dog related, there's all these other stipulations that you as a victim or complainant has to jump through to get it properly reported. So in any case, and then the Harris situation, the city is saying, look, we're not liable because you complainants did not follow the proper procedure for reporting this stuff. That's my understanding. So we'll see how that goes. But that's
it looks like basically there's some cities have something close to like prosecutorial discretion.
Oh yeah.
But if when it comes to selectively enforcing certain ordinances over others, but I think what it all hinges on is whether someone was harmed and has standing to sue. Like if a city doesn't enforce an ordinance, but no one's actually being hurt, you really, you're not going to be able to sue them.
Well, right, because there's no, I mean, in a lawsuit, you need to, like, the complaint has to stipulate some kind of damages, like somebody died, for example. But yeah, if they don't, if they don't enforce a statute, but yeah, if nobody's harmed, then there'd be no cause to sue. But of course, if there was no harm done, then there'd be no case for a lawsuit to begin with. So.
Yeah, so you can kind of, I think that's what it boils down to. Just quickly looking at certain like different cases where a city was sued for refusing to enforce like an ordinance, right? Like in place, instances where people's like couldn't exercise their civil rights, like free speech stuff, with like issues with protesting. There's a bunch of them out there. Property owners suing the city for refusing to enforce its own zoning ordinances, which resulted in harm to the property owners. There's a fun one about San Francisco refusing to enforce prostitution ordinances, and it impacting like residents of a certain neighborhood. So yeah, and most of the results of these are monetary awards and the city having to like actually actually enforce the laws on its books. So yeah, I guess so. I guess maybe they do have an argument. Is like,
I mean, I think they have an ethical argument because you brought up discretion. It's
they
like
have a moral argument for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they have. I mean, that's the thing is like police officers, prosecutors, judges, and so forth have discretion. And actually, I put it in my first monologue when I came back out of hiatus was that I think the problem is they abuse discretion. In other words, they'll find, okay, if I just got to pull a reason out of my ass to not go after these dogs or dog owners, I'll come up with, I'll like contort it to I'll turn it into a logical pretzel, but I'm going to do whatever I can. I'm going to work my ass off to make sure nothing gets done about this. I mean, that's my impression in a lot of cases. I think that's what's happening here. And sometimes it's even written into the law, like I said, like with the Ramon Nahara case, is what they do is they rig the whole system. I mean, formally rig the system in favor of dog owners. And even when it's not, then they, abuse discretion to try to get them off the hook. And that's why it's a very difficult problem to solve, because we need to return to order first. And I think that would be really helpful. We were on one of these calls. I don't know if you were on it. It was a month or two ago. And I guess Well, I think as Sheepy said, yeah, there's probably a lot we can do within the existing legal framework, right? Like, for example, I don't know, do we even need, like, say, a barking ordinance? Like, not necessarily, just treat it like every other disturbance of the peace. But the problem is that it's not. They write in all these extra protections for the dog owner. It's very common. Or same thing too, if the dog attacks somebody, let's just treat it as reckless endangerment. That's what it would be if it were anything else. So why not just do that? Let's just do that, but the thing is that the part of the problem is when you try to legislate this stuff, they use it as an excuse to sort of codify more protections for dog owners.
Right.
That's the problem,
It becomes a shell game of like, well, okay, you made a specific thing, but as long as I'm outside of those specific conditions, I can game it to where I'm all right. But
it is. Yeah, they rigged the system in favor of dogs. And they got a couple of things. First of all, you got a whole bunch of unfair and unreasonable and unjust protections. That needs to go. And you've also got abuse of discretion, and that needs to go. And I think that then because that's what I'm saying. People say, oh, we need to do this. We need we need to okay, it's a death penalty for the owner of any dog that kills. But even that is like, okay, are they actually going to prosecute those cases or try to come up with some asinine reason for not doing so? It's like, okay, this guy turned his dogs loose. They forced their way into a neighbor's home and killed the occupant. But it's like, I don't know. I think they were provoking that dog. I think this is somehow justified. Maybe we can't, dog works in mysterious ways, right? It's like, I know the law stipulates certain things, but we're just going to let it go, right? It's all good.
Yeah, it's really hard to prove that like the dogs were set loose with the intent to kill somebody. The owner would have to almost confess it.
Owning the dog at all is probably shows some intent, right? I mean,
well, realistically, to Mr. J's point, the one bite rule is complete bullshit. like that's why this happened, is because you get a free bite. Like if you go bite somebody, you're going to jail, bro. You know what I mean? Like you don't get a free bite. You don't get a free vehicular manslaughter.
Some nutters free punch in the face.
Yeah,
exactly. So the one, like if we got rid of the one bite thing, this would all disappear. And you say that, and then I guarantee you a nutter is going to come out of the woodwork and bring up like how Toto bit the lady in Wizard of Oz and like how evil she was for wanting the dog put down.
right.
I was watching that with the kids not too long ago, and I was like, man, the propaganda started early. You know what I mean? Like this has been going on for a long time.
Yeah, they use that. Well, a lot of pit nutters they say, oh, well, Petey from the Little Rascals was a pit bull, and they bring that up all the time as if, that's an accurate description or depiction of reality. It's like, come on.
I love, that's the biggest issue I think and it's causing so many problems is people they cannot parse what they experience in entertainment and media is more real than what they experience in the real world. Like it really is. You know what I mean? Like they can't, like they'll bring up Petey from Little Rascals. You understand that like that's all fake. That's what we call fiction. Like that's completely made up, but they'll use it to justify all that.
Yeah. Well, that's what I tell people. It's funny, I always have conversations going on in the background. And I had, actually, it's somebody I haven't heard from or communicated with for a while. They were on the old Discord. And a younger person, I think, probably like 20 to 25 age bracket. And they asked me, if I'm a fan of some of this material, like let's say I'm a Scooby-Doo fan, is it hypocritical to, consume and enjoy this material and be in our space at the same time, right? Just asking my opinion. And I said, you know what, like, if you find like Scoob or Marmaduke entertaining, like, don't worry about it. As long as you appreciate, like, you fully understand that those are not accurate depictions of actual dogs, right? They're cartoons. Even a live action show, like, say, Little Rascals, right? I mean, think about it. It's scripted, it's carefully choreographed, it's edited, right? It's not a real depiction of the real world. And, maybe some fiction is closer to reality than others. Maybe it's not always the case, but you would always assume it's like, okay, that's not an accurate depiction of reality. So I told this person, I said, don't worry about it. It's like, you don't have to give up, reading the Marmaduke comic strip because you're in this space. It's like, what, as long as you, appreciate it for what it is. And that was just
Kermit the Frog's not a real frog. It's
exactly.
It's a felt puppet. Like
yeah.
I would if I was king, like I actually do feel this, as insane as it sounds. But if I was like king of, the world or whatever, I would make every TV show end by like panning the camera out so that you can see it's a sound stage and like the cameras, and because it's just, I don't know what like mechanism and people it hacks, and like our brain is supposed to live in a cave and gather berries, right? But like for whatever reason, it just works, and they confuse these fictionalized, media products for the real world. That's really the biggest issue we're dealing with.
You know what? Like I'm going like way off topic and down a rabbit hole, but pursuant to that, I watched a documentary recently, and I mean, I already knew this, but something that blew everybody's mind, it just made everybody's head explode, was, you're familiar with a TV show, The Brady Bunch and the house, that it blew everybody's mind because they would show the exterior of the house, maybe even like with a car pulling in and out of the driveway, everything. But what blew everybody's mind was like the interior shots. None of them were filmed inside that house, right? The exterior,
like
the
Golden
interior,
Girls.
or because all the interior shots, that was all filmed in a, on a stage, on a set in a studio in Hollywood, right? But it just blew it. Like, really? Because that's what they did at one point. I guess they got access to that house. I did a tour, and it was like completely different inside. What was funny was I think it was it HGTV? That was a documentary I watched. Was they bought that house, the one shown in the exterior, and they completely gutted it and redid it so it actually matched the TV show. It's a very expensive renovation. And they even brought in some of the original actors. They're like, wow, this really does look like it. But yeah, that's the thing, is like it blew everybody's mind. It's like what you're seeing, like when you see them sitting at the dining room table eating, that's not filmed inside that house. Now, really, again, something like that's totally innocuous, like who cares? But yeah, these are not accurate depictions of reality. Or even this show Seinfeld takes place in New York. Almost all of that was filmed in California. That's the other thing people don't realize. When you have a TV show that's set wherever, like almost all of that is filmed in, or at least used up until pretty recently, was filmed in California.
It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is filmed in LA. Like if the Office is filmed in LA. Like Central Pennsylvania does not have like scrub desert and stuff. Like look, and like you would say, oh well, that's obvious. Like anyone that hears this is going to say, well, yeah, why are they talking about that? That's obvious. No, the fuck it isn't. Like I'm starting to learn that like no, this is not obvious to most people. Most people see it watch the flickering box and they think that
I want to add to this. It's really funny, like looking at dog culture. Like, I heard this quote, and I'm pretty sure it's probably from Charles Barkley, and I don't really want to give him the props for this, but this is how I see dog culture when they walk around with bully breeds. It's like putting makeup, it's like putting lipstick on a pig. Like, I saw this guy walking a pit bull with a sweater on, with a little backpack, like it's carrying its own poop bags. Like, it's supposed to be so wholesome until it pits out. It's like,
mimicry of what
that's not a little cuddly creature.
It's mimicry of what they see on TV, because that creates like the idea of what other people think, you know what I mean? Like they watch the commercial or whatever, and they think, oh, this is reality. This is how other people are. I want to, fit. I want to be agreeable. I'm going to imitate what I see people doing on the box, not reality. And, or they get like a puppy and they think, oh, in like 2 months, this puppy's going to be fetching my slippers and getting me the paper and, help me. Right. Like they get that idea in their head that it's just that easy, just like television, like it's crazy. I think that's probably the biggest reason the dog problem has gotten to where it is straight up people having TV brain.
Yeah, TV brain. I read
like or social media or whatever.
Now we're
social
getting
media added a whole other horrific dimension to this, where if TV kind of shapes people's opinions about reality to the point that it overrides their lived physical experiences, social media does that as well, but encourages like performative behavior
it's performative,
to farm clout and social likes.
It's interactive, so you can use, like you said, use that for cloud farming or fishing or virtue signaling or whatever. Ooh, look how good I am! Woohoo!
Some kind of. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I wanted to. We're actually, because we're coming up on 2.5 hours. I'm probably going to wrap it up in a few minutes. But when I was in high school, I read a book called Remote Control. I think it was published in the late 70s. Because what it was? I think it was sophomore year, and my English teacher said, okay, for this month's book report, it has to be a nonfiction book. And I'm like, because I read a lot, but I was like, shit, I don't want to, I would have done like another like Heinlein or something, but I was like, crap, what do I? So I saw this book. I was like, all right. And what it dealt was how like too much media like really influences people's brains. So the book was called Remote Control. And the gist of it was that people who consume lots of media, which at the time, lots of television, have a distorted view of reality. And again, this is written almost 50 years ago. Which I found the whole thing fascinating. I think I probably got an A on the book report, but I found the whole thing just really, interesting. And it sort of gave me, I guess, because I was still pretty young and impressionable, it really sort of cemented in my mind, the problems with these things. Like, again, like a television addicted culture and things like that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with these things. I consume all that crap too, right? But I do so with the understanding that I'm not watching a realistic depiction of reality. Because that was, the point that the book was making. It's like you watch lots of sitcoms. If you don't have that understanding, you come away with the awareness that every problem gets solved in 22 minutes with 8 minutes for commercials. And that's not real life.
Yeah, exactly. And you see that in the debate with people when we bring facts. Like, it seems like just almost weekly at this point, there's a new like gruesome mauling of someone or a death. that you can point to. So that's what's happening in reality, and that's the most acute problem. There's a dog barking in somebody's neighborhood right now, driving 4 people crazy. You know what I mean? So there's also those issues as well, that come along with, that are part of the broader dog problem. So we can we always have those to display, right? But when you bring those to the debate, you've got your package of receipts that you're throwing out, and then the other side is quoting shit from TV shows or things that have been produced with social media. And now with AI, one thing it's good at is producing, images pretty quick that surprisingly a lot of people can't tell aren't real. I've seen that on Facebook where they'll show like a picture of, a dog, usually a pit bull, and it's quote unquote smiling with its puppies and all that. And it's just like that's an AI generated image, grandma. Like what are you not getting about that? Do you not understand that's not? So they're bringing like all of their arguments are rooted in, not reality. It's culture, entertainment, memes that get passed back and forth to people that aren't necessarily real. It's like that's everything on the other side of it is just complete programming. There's nothing with any basis in reality about it at all. Even the fact that people think dogs can smile. Like, why would you think that? TV, like dogs can't smile. No, and they're
Why
not
do you
people.
even think the thing can think?
Or that wagging its tail means it's happy. No, it's not. That's not. That doesn't mean happiness.
Let me ask the AI, why do dogs wag their tail? Who knows? We might get something. Well, because again, this is going to be the consensus. Do dogs wag their tails? Why do dogs wag? Now I'm just going to say why they wag their tails. Yeah, primarily as a form of expressing a range of emotions like happiness, excitement, or arousal, or even anxiety, depending on the speed and direction of tail movement, as well as other body language cues. So,
dude, that is like reading chicken bones. Like, how fast was it wagging its tail? Well, that might have been, it was exciting, or that might have been, I mean, like, dude, like, come on, are we really gonna act like we can interpret the speed at which a tail is being wagged as like, oh, what do the bones say today? Am I gonna
it's a
make some
wag
money?
rate. Like, how many wags per minute is a dog making? Well, if it's like 10 to 20, then it means this. And if it's 21 to 40, it means this other complete.
But hold on. But it's also trying to say that the tail is some complex form of communication too.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, so yeah, that I think that's something we should do on an episode. Is it would take some preparation, but it would be nice to kind of dissect like all the dog memes, the nutter memes, where they come from and why they're not real, and just refute them. That would be a lot of fun too, because
I mean, like pit bulls or nanny dogs, like, for example.
I mean, I know we've done that 1,000 times, but like there needs to be like one video out there that is very
well, the thing with that was that that's completely made up. It was interesting because the first time that anybody knows about that was mentioned in culture was it was a New York Times article, I think, in 1971, and it was put out by a dog breeder, someone who bred Staffordshire Terriers. So ostensibly to like generate more business, right? To sell more puppies. But thing was, it was presented as news. That's the thing. Like, it wasn't an ad in the New York Times. It was an article that these are like, I think the term was nursemaid dogs. There may have been some people pointed out that sometimes in stage shows of like, say, Peter Pan, like the dog in Peter Pan isn't always, Nana isn't always presented as the same dog. I think one of the commenters told me in the book it was a Newfoundland. in the Disney animated feature, it appeared to be a Saint Bernard, but it's been presented as other dog breeds. And I think apparently there were like stage presentations of Peter Pan where the dog was either a pit bull or some kind of bully breed. But the thing is like I think that, but again, that's fiction, right? And it doesn't even derive from the original source material. They're like, okay, we need a dog actor to play Nana. Like, what's available, right? They weren't necessarily trying to make that point, or maybe they were, but the first time it was referred to explicitly was in 1971, and it was presented as news, interestingly.
Yeah. So I don't know. It would be good to have like one video or something out there that's like like the reference video, or it's like,
yeah,
they all get taken down in that one video. When people bring it up, you link the video. It's like it's done. It's settled forever. We don't, we got to do a better job of like people in the space in general need to kind of like, hey, we need succinct, like focused media that just kind of takes each one of these memes, lays them to rest in a very like clear cut, decisive way. That way that's the only way to beat it, I think, in my opinion. Because yeah, I mean, that's what we're dealing with. We're not arguing with like people with facts and stuff. We're arguing with Disney. You know what I mean?
Yep. All right. I think with all that said, I think it's time to wrap it up. You know what, Mr. J, I'll give you the last word. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, we can start from the top and work our way all the way down, but as long as it shits, barks, or tries to bite, it's got to go.
See, that's a really straightforward plan we can get behind. And it's a problem too, is you have this stuff, maybe, too many people, I guess, overcomplicate this stuff. Like, it doesn't, I mean, maybe these problems are difficult to solve, but they're really not that complicated. So yeah, agree totally. All right, guys. So I'm going to wrap it up. So this is Animal Uncontrol. And as always, people first. Thanks, guys. Catch you next time.
Guys, take care. Be safe.
Later, man. Sure. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.